Slightly hiding behind Mum, this was Princess Charlotte arriving for her first day at school, Thomas's in London. There was a handshake for teacher Helen Haslam and the confidence that big brother George would also be looking out for her.
Princess Charlotte has never begged to be treated differently. She simply wanted to be another face in the corridor, another youngster memorizing multiplication tables, practicing piano, or laughing with pals at recess. But even at 7, being a princess means that others will notice you, whether you want them to or not. Charlotte, recognized for her compassion and calm confidence, adjusted to school life as best she could, bearing herself with a delicate dignity that even adults noted. Teachers loved how she never behaved entitled, and many pupils described her as warm, accessible, and entertaining. She participated in activities, worked hard on her projects, and treated everyone with dignity, never reminding anybody of her family background. But one day, that peaceful equilibrium was disturbed. A new student came, a lad who didn't care that Charlotte was a princess or that she was attempting to lead a regular life. To him, she was a target, a means to garner attention and feel strong in a world he didn't fully comprehend. His comments were cutting, his insults casual but vicious, and his presence altered the atmosphere in Charlotte's daily existence. Initially, Charlotte chose silence. She felt that ignoring cruelty would make it disappear. She kept her chin up, clutched her books, and continued walking, hoping it would pass. What began as whispered words quickly evolved into something that would put her strength, courage, and faith in compassion to the test. What occurred next would not only alter Charlotte's life, but also leave a whole school, and those watching from afar, speechless. His name was Jasper, and he arrived at Lambrook with the type of agitated energy that made professors look at each other as soon as he stepped into a room. Jasper, a transfer from another private school, carried his notoriety like a badge. He was brash, loud, and never hesitant to push limits, even if it meant harming others in order to be acknowledged. For Charlotte, Jasper was simply another new pupil. She welcomed him like she did everyone else, with a courteous smile when they first crossed paths near the playground. She had no reason to believe he would see her as anything more than a classmate, another youngster with the same spelling tests and filthy sneakers after playtime. But Jasper noticed something else. To him, Charlotte represented something unfair. A girl born into a world he couldn't even imagine, with a surname that made adults pause and classmates murmur. The first time Jasper put her to the test was after art class on a windy Thursday afternoon. Charlotte was going alone, carrying a notebook she had spent days working on, the corners of the pages poking out from her tight grip. Jasper sauntered forward, making enough noise for a few adjacent pupils to turn and look, but not enough to warn the instructor. "Must be nice," he murmured, raising his head with a grin. "Having everyone bow to you just because you were born lucky." Charlotte halted, her gaze meeting him for a brief but steady time. She did not react. She didn't roll her eyes or scold him. She merely turned, adjusted her grasp on her sketchbook, and kept walking. Behind her, a handful of kids giggled nervously, wondering whether to laugh or turn away. Jasper smiled, encouraged by the attention, and cried out to her, "Enjoy your royal treatment, princess." That moment was the little and silent flame that would ignite into something far worse. For Jasper, it was a game. For Charlotte, it was the start of a test she never wanted, one that would demonstrate to the world just how powerful a princess could be. Following that first encounter, Jasper appeared to have a new motivation for seeking Charlotte. It began with murmurs in the corridors, murmured under his breath but loud enough for her to hear. "Careful, princess. Wouldn't want to get your crown dirty," he'd taunt as she passed in the muddy corridor after the rain. During physical education, when pupils were partnered for a relay, the teacher shouted out their names. "Charlotte, Jasper, your partners." A few children exchanged anxious stares. Jasper sprinted over with the same smile, bending near to say, "Try to keep up, Your Highness." He would then intentionally slow down midway through the run, crying out loudly, "Go ahead, Charlotte! You're used to receiving special treatment." Students would laugh, not because they found it humorous, but because they didn't know what else to do. They did not want to be next on Jasper's list, and that was precisely how he preferred it. Jasper's taunting became more intense in class. When a teacher complimented Charlotte's project, Jasper would say, "Of course she did," rolling his eyes so everyone could see. During painting, he'd pass past her workstation and accidentally push her elbow, causing her paintbrush to slip. "Oops," he'd remark, innocently smiling as she attempted to remove the smudge off her paper. Sticky notes were the worst. Charlotte would open her desk and discover them nestled between her books. Born to rule, get over yourself. No one knew who had left them, but Charlotte didn't have to speculate. Every time she looked across the room, Jasper was already staring at her, eyes icy and daring her to say anything. It was not simply words. Charlotte returned from lunch one day to discover her painstakingly constructed scientific project, a tiny volcano she had spent hours perfecting, knocked down with vinegar and baking soda poured across the table. Jasper entered seconds later, gazed at the debris, and shrugged. "Guess royalty isn't earthquake-proof." Charlotte did not report him. She did not cry in front of others. She merely remained there, calmly picking up the pieces of her creation, her gaze intent on the work, her little hands quivering slightly. This was no longer simply teasing. It was a slow, steady loss of safety, a test of how much a 7-year-old could take as the world watched. The breaking point occurred on a dreary Friday afternoon. Students queued up to board their buses, umbrellas blossoming like flowers against the dismal sky. Charlotte, clutching her tiny pink umbrella, was silently waiting her turn when Jasper passed by, pretending to tie his shoelaces. Without looking up, he said, "It must be nice having a whole country bend for you." It wasn't just the words that stung so deeply. It was the nonchalant brutality, the way they flowed off his mouth like a reality he desperately wanted her to accept. Charlotte's chest clenched, her throat burning, and she blinked hard, unwilling to let tears fall. She looked back, but Jasper had already walked away, disappearing into the crowd. That night, Charlotte sat on the floor of her bedroom, her school bag unfastened and books scattering over the carpet. She attempted to distract herself with her homework, but her eyes were blurry with tears. She hastily wiped tears away, terrified her brothers would notice and her parents would get concerned. She muttered to herself, "It will pass," but her terror was mounting. Charlotte never informed anybody about Jasper's remarks, the sticky notes, or the volcano he destroyed. But quiet does not always conceal the truth. One evening, Prince William noted Charlotte's quietness, the way her laughing was less frequent, and how she paused before discussing school. He gently asked Charlotte if everything was all right, but she merely nodded before going to her room. William knew his daughter, and he knew there was something wrong. The following morning, William traveled to Lambrook School alone, with no public outcry or royal security. The crew was shocked to see him, his demeanor calm yet deliberate. He requested a private meeting with the headmaster to better understand his daughter's situation. After evaluating the staff's silent worries and analyzing what they had seen, William requested to speak with Jasper. The youngster went into the room, apprehensive of what to anticipate. But William didn't reprimand or raise his voice. Instead, he answered questions in a compassionate but forceful tone. "Why do you feel the need to say these things? What do you want to achieve?" Jasper's defenses crumbled. For the first time, he revealed that he felt tiny, out of place, and unsure how to behave around Charlotte. His jokes were an effort at feeling powerful, but they had gone too far. William told Jasper tales from his own youth about feeling awkward and not fitting in, reminding him that respect is not won by making others feel small. Something moved in that silent chamber, and for the first time in weeks, Charlotte's world was about to transform. Later that afternoon, Jasper saw Charlotte seated beneath a tree near the playground, her sketchbook poised on her knees, shading a detailed painting of the gloomy sky. Her pencil halted as Jasper's shadow moved over the paper. For a minute, neither spoke. Jasper then murmured in a softer voice than Charlotte had ever heard from him, "I'm sorry." Charlotte looked up, her eyes alert for any signs of ridicule. However, there was none. Jasper's hands twitched at his sides. His shoulders tensed as he continued, "I shouldn't have uttered those words. I did not aim to make you feel horrible." Charlotte pushed her lips into a narrow line. She wasn't sure what to say. She wanted to know why he selected her and why he needed to harm her to feel noticed. But instead, she just nodded. "Okay," she muttered before returning to her sketching. It was a brief moment, but it altered everything. Word circulated slowly that Prince William had visited the school, that Jasper had talked with him, and that an apology had been issued. Nobody understood the exact facts, but the air surrounding Charlotte began to change. The voices in the corridors disappeared. When Jasper delivered his words, the apprehensive giggles came to an end. Teachers, suddenly vigilant, paid more attention to exchanges. Charlotte, who had become so silent, started to find her voice again. She raised her hand in class to contribute to conversations. She offered to assist younger kids in the library and contributed during group activities, her laughter returning in short, brilliant bursts that made her peers happy. Anya, the student who had once shared Charlotte's food, invited her to a book discussion over lunch. And Thomas, who had heard Jasper's taunting, asked if she wanted to collaborate with him on a scientific project. Emily, a distant supporter, put a letter inside Charlotte's backpack that simply stated, "You are stronger than you think." Meanwhile, Jasper's conduct evolved, although gradually. He stopped hovering near Charlotte's desk and ceased making subtle barbs and remarks. He started raising his hand in class and engaging in debates without snark. A youngster called Felix, who shared Jasper's passion in coding, welcomed him to the school's robotics club. It became a location where Jasper could focus his restless energy on creating something rather than tearing someone down. Charlotte and Jasper were not instant friends, and no one expected them to be. They no longer carried the strain that had before filled every shared space between them. During art class, Jasper spilled a palette of brushes near Charlotte's desk, causing her to flinch. He hastily said, "Sorry," sincerely and quietly, before returning to his seat. Charlotte's fingers remained steady as she continued to paint, the colors mixing slowly across the paper. The difference was subtle, but genuine. In the quiet moments between these modest adjustments, Lambrook began to seem like a safer place, not just for Charlotte, but for everyone. Prince William's visit did more than put an end to the bullying. It sowed the seeds of a more profound transformation within Lambrook's gates. Following the event, inspired by William's attitude, the headmaster convened with the teaching staff to explore ways to foster a culture in which respect was not just demanded, but understood. They decided to start a new initiative, Respect Week, a 5-day celebration focused on compassion, empathy, and understanding how simple actions may have long-term consequences. Posters featuring vivid colors and hand-drawn pictures by kids were displayed throughout the school, each holding statements such as "Every voice matters" and "Kindness is a choice." Charlotte, who was first apprehensive, was urged by Anya to co-lead a Respect Week session titled Creating Space for Everyone. Standing in front of her peers, Charlotte's hands trembled slightly as she began. She did not say anything about Jasper, the sticky notes, or the destroyed volcano. Instead, she discussed how silence can hurt as much as words, and how everyone needs to feel comfortable at school. Sometimes, Charlotte began gently, surveying the room, people behave out because they are afraid or feel alone. However, it is unacceptable to inflict harm to others as a result of it. We can teach them a better way. Students listened, some nodding, some deep in contemplation. One younger kid raised her hand and said, "I laughed once when someone else was teased. I had no idea it could hurt that much." Charlotte smiled and replied, "It's okay. We all learn." Meanwhile, Jasper was gradually welcomed into new locations. The robotics club became his safe haven, a place where he and Felix could develop models and test code, their laughter filling the lab as they corrected programming errors and discussed ideas. Jasper wasn't perfect. He still spoke bad jokes and had a quick temper, but the society around him had changed. Teasing no longer elicited laughter. Stillness replaced his old habits, and encouragement replaced his real attempts. During Respect Week, the school established a wall of stories where students could leave anonymous messages about times they felt excluded or how someone's compassion made a difference. One day, Charlotte passed by and discovered a letter in familiar handwriting. "I damaged someone because I didn't know how to handle my own issues. I am sorry." Charlotte halted and read it softly. She said nothing. She did not need to. She merely flattened the letter a bit flatter against the wall before continuing. Lambrook's mood had changed by the conclusion of the term. Students held doors open for one another, including newcomers in recess games, and gave assistance with group tasks. Teachers observed a shift in classroom atmosphere, with a sense of calm replacing the stress of prior months. Charlotte's quiet courage and Jasper's delayed, agonizing awakening had altered their school, demonstrating that even the tiniest voice may have a ripple effect that transforms a whole community. On the final day before the holiday break, Lambrook's hallways were filled with the quiet commotion of youngsters zipping up bags and whispering excitedly about family travels and Christmas preparations. Charlotte strolled into the corridor, her arms full of books to return to the library, her hair carefully pulled back, and her short steps steady and deliberate. As she reached the corner, she almost collided into Jasper, who was walking the opposite direction, a robotics handbook tucked under his arm. For a brief period, time appeared to stop. Charlotte's gaze was unwavering, whereas Jasper's seemed hesitant. He gave her a modest, courteous nod, as if to acknowledge all they hadn't spoken. Charlotte returned the nod, a faint grin pulling at the corner of her lips, and went down the corridor. Nothing further needed to be stated. That one peaceful moment was the culmination of weeks of silent courage and gradual development, a reminder that genuine strength does not always yell. Sometimes it might be found in the soft resilience of a little girl who refuses to let harshness define her soul, or in a boy's desire to learn, grow, and try again. As Lambrook's doors closed for the term, the school stood not only as a place of tradition and learning, but also as a community transformed by the quiet bravery of a princess who refused to demand special treatment, and the awakening of a boy who learned that respect is earned through kindness, not fear. Charlotte went for the holidays with her family, her laughter returning and her mood lifted. Jasper came home with a robotics kit and a pledge to himself to do better. And while the world outside may never know the specifics of what occurred behind those school walls, those who observed it will never forget that it just takes one act of quiet strength to alter everything.